Incredible journey, a wolf cub's plea to a kind woman. Transforms a frozen fate, you won't believe what happens next. The tough winter in Jackson, Wyoming, had not only chilled the air but also sent a shiver down Sarah's spine as she sat alone in her father's veterinary clinic. The place once alive with barking dogs and chirping cats now echoed with silence, each tick of the clock a reminder of her father's passing and the burden of his legacy. She poured every bit of her heart into her work, determined to keep the clinic afloat, yet every day felt like a weight slowly crushing her spirit. When had the joy of saving animals turned into a struggle for survival? As she mopped the floor, Sarah couldn't shake off the gnawing fears within her. Bills piled up like icy drifts on the windowsill, each envelope a bitter reminder of dwindling funds. Should she give in to the pressure and sell the clinic? Was honoring her father's memory worth this relentless battle, one that seemed to pull her deeper into despair? Staring out into the swirling snow, her racing thoughts collided. Doubt and determination danced in her mind like the snowflakes outside, unpredictable and cold. Just as she began to wrap up a long shift, a soft whimper caught her attention. Outside, against the backdrop of the frigid evening, a tiny wolf cub lay abandoned in the snow, shivering and alone. Its dark eyes locked onto hers, a plea for warmth and protection. Sarah felt a visceral connection, her own feelings of isolation reflected in the creature's fragile form. Without thinking, she rushed outside, heart racing, adrenaline flooding her veins. How could she turn away from such a desperate plea? Bringing the cub, whom she named Luna, into the clinic ignited a flicker of hope amidst the cold. As she held the trembling creature, she could feel the emotional barriers within her beginning to crack. Their nights together became filled with laughter and bonding as she nursed Luna back to health. Yet, every warm moment brought with it a sting of panic. With her father's spirit lingering in every corner of the clinic, Sarah often imagined what he would say. Would he be proud of her efforts, or would he chastise her for straying from tradition? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But as bonds deepened, so did the towns divide. Tensions flared as activists clashed with hunters, each side adamant in their beliefs. Sarah felt the heat of the community's conflict fan the flames of her own struggle. She wanted to protect Luna, a creature so similar to her broken self, but doing so ignited a firestorm of criticism that engulfed her clinic. With every insult, doubt crept further into her mind. Was caring for Luna an act of love or reckless defiance? The betrayal of a trusted friend left Sarah reeling, the very foundation of her beliefs shaking beneath her. As snowy winds battered the clinic windows, she faced the reality. Loyalty to her father imposed limits on her desire for change. Could she truly advocate for Luna, for wildlife, without shattering her familial legacy? The weight pressed down around her, as suffocating as the icy cold outside. As the whispers of the townsfolk grew louder, Sarah found herself trapped in a spiraling conflict, teetering on the edge of despair. Would she have the courage to stand for what she believed in, or would she remain frozen in this tumultuous uncertainty? The warmth of Luna's gaze filled her with both hope and a profound questioning of what lay ahead, leaving Sarah to ponder if she could withstand the fight that beckoned in the stormy shadows of her heart. The storm raged outside, but inside the clinic Sarah stood alone, Luna cradled in her arms. The warmth of the cub's small body contrasted sharply with the biting cold that permeated her heart. It was as if Luna had become a living embodiment of hope. Fragile yet resilient, a testament to the fight for survival. Yet in the quiet moments, Sarah felt the churning doubt within her grow stronger. It was time to make decisions, not just for Luna, but for her own existence. Every harsh comment from the townsfolk rang in her ears like an unwelcome symphony. "What are you doing with a wolf?" they said. "You're betraying your father's work." The words cut deeper than the winter chill, She was losing herself amid their expectations, and with each passing day, Sarah found it increasingly difficult to discern her own voice. Was it wrong to care for Luna? Was her compassion an act of defiance or simply a new chapter? That night, as she closed the clinic and turned off the lights, Sarah made her way home with Luna nestled safely in her coat. She felt an insistent tug at her heart, a reminder that every choice she made echoed through her life. Once inside her apartment, she faced the stark reality of her finances. A mountain of overdue bills loomed before her, each statement pressing down like a winter weight. The clinic was on the brink of closing, and all those precious memories of her father felt like ghosts whispering through the hall. Her mind was a deluge, visions of success mingling with the fear of failure, and a desire to preserve her father's legacy clawed at her conscience. Yet as she looked down at Luna, she felt the flicker of inspiration. The cub embodied the embodiment of survival against the harshness of the world. The idea began to churn within her. If both she and Luna were fighters in their own right, perhaps they could forge a new path together. Fueled by the dream of living her truth, Sarah crafted a plan and put it on paper. She would host an event to educate the community about wildlife rehabilitation and create awareness about the struggles spirits like Luna faced. It was risky, she knew. The same townspeople who criticized her would either come together to support or condemn her efforts before they even heard her speak. As she put the finishing touches on her plan, the ramifications of her choice began to crystallize. She would step out from her father's shadow, exposing herself to critiques, but also opening up to new allies. The thought beat in her chest like a distant drum, beckoning her to take the leap. Would her voice resonate in a way that could shift the narrative? The confrontation she feared was looming, one that would either liberate her or doom her to the life she desperately sought to escape. As dawn broke, the world outside was blanketed in fresh snow. It was a new day, but deep within Sarah's soul still lingered uncertainty. With one final look at the possibilities before her, she steeled her resolve and whispered to Luna, "We're going to fight for you." The weight of the significant choice ahead loomed like thunder in the distance. Tomorrow, she would stand before the community. The time had come to face her fears and tell her truth. But would she find the understanding she sought, or would she be met once more with resistance? The morning sun struggled to pierce the gray clouds as Sarah made her way back to the clinic, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and fear. Luna nestled against her chest, oblivious to the storm of emotions swirling in her caretaker's mind. Each step felt heavier, weighted by the knowledge that today would be pivotal, not only for her relationship with Luna, but also for the future of her father's legacy. When she arrived, the clinic stood still, its familiar sterile smells and soft sounds of machinery offering a strange comfort amid her turmoil. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of antiseptic and hope, and unlocked the door. The familiar creak resounded in the hall, a welcoming but daunting echo of the past. She paused for a moment, letting the quiet envelop her before she initiated the start of what could become a defining moment of her life. As she began to prepare for the day's visitors, Sarah's hands trembled. Would they come? Doubts crept in, accompanied by memories of hearing whispered conversations in the town. "Sarah's lost it," they'd say, "trying to save a wolf cub." Each whisper was a reminder that she stood against a tide of skepticism, facing a community that struggled to understand. She focused her thoughts on Luna instead, who was now sprawled in a sunny patch on the floor, blissfully unaware. The little wolf was an embodiment of resilience and defiance, and for a fleeting moment, Sarah envied that innocence. "You make it look so easy," she murmured, but beneath her admiration brewed her own anxiety. What if she stumbled over her words? What if she couldn't communicate the depth of her passion? Preparing a presentation had seemed straightforward, but now, confronted with the enormity of her task, her articulation faltered. She refused to let doubt paralyze her and decided to transform her fears into a weapon against resistance. She'd practiced her speech countless times in front of Luna, trying to summon the passion she felt and convey it with authenticity. A sudden knock at the door jolted her from her reverie. One by one, townsfolk entered, a mix of familiar faces and skeptical frowns. They shuffled their feet and exchanged glances, lacking the cohesive energy she had hoped for. Panic curled in her stomach, and she reminded herself of the purpose of this meeting. It wasn't just for herself. It was for Luna and her mission to educate. With trembling hands, she took her position in front of the small crowd, gathered beneath flickering fluorescent lights. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice wavering slightly but growing steadier as she continued. She spoke of Luna, the struggles of wildlife rehabilitation, and the importance of understanding these animals not as threats but as vital parts of the ecosystem. Their faces remained stony, some were openly skeptical, crossing their arms in disbelief. Each lifted brow or cynical sidelong glance fanned the flames of her determination. She pressed on, recounting her father's philosophy of care, his fervent beliefs, and how they had come to influence her own journey. The words flowed from a place raw with emotion, her passion for Luna intertwined with her legacy, urging the audience to reconsider their views. As she reached the speech's peak, a shift in the atmosphere occurred. She saw a few expressions soften, grudging curiosity sparking within the lines of their faces. It was a delicate turn, and though it felt precarious, it filled her with a newfound resolve. They were listening, but just as hope began to seep into the atmosphere, a familiar voice sliced through the tentative understanding. "You think you can come here and change our minds just because you feel sorry for a wild animal?" It was one of the most vocal critics, arms still crossed defiantly. An unnecessary standoff had begun, and the air thickened with tension. Sarah's heart raced. This was the crossroads she'd feared. The confrontation had arrived, and her determination burned brighter. She wouldn't back down. Would she rise to the moment and defend what she believed in, or would she falter under the collective judgment? A voice deep within her urged her to confront not only them, but herself as well. As she prepared to respond, the weight of the moment pressed heavily, both a challenge and an opportunity. With Luna's small eyes watching her intently, she realized she wasn't just fighting for her vision. She was unleashing a battle within herself, a fierce struggle for acceptance and the courage to stand firm against the tide of doubt. What would emerge from this moment of confrontation? Would her words hold enough weight to shift perspectives, or would she fall back into the shadows of her past? The answers were just beyond reach, teetering on the edge of her resolve. Sarah squared her shoulders, standing tall against the weight of her critic's gaze. The moment stretched, suffocating her with judgment, but she felt a spark ignite deep within her. This was her chance to break free from the chains of expectation and fear, a crucible through which she might forge a stronger version of herself. "Every creature has its place," she began, her voice rising above the murmurs enveloping the room. "Luna isn't just a wolf cub to feel compassion for. She represents the larger challenge of our relationship with nature." She locked eyes with her opponent, searching for any flicker of recognition, any crack in the armor of skepticism. "The world is changing. If we continue to see these animals as threats, we'll only push them further away from the survival that they deserve." The indecision in her voice receded, replaced by fierce determination. This was not merely a battle for Luna, it was a fight for her father's legacy, and ultimately a revelation of herself. The silence hung thick, and Sarah poured every ounce of her conviction into her words. "I can't change everyone's mind overnight, but I believe that understanding comes from conversation and connection, not from fear," she stated, her tone firm, her heart racing. "I know the risks involved in caring for these animals, the challenge of rehabilitating them. But isn't that worth it?" Someone from the back of the room shifted, and Sarah's eyes darted to them. She felt a knot of anxiety loosen as their expression shifted toward curiosity. It occurred to her that even one open mind could spark a fire. "Look at Luna," she continued, gesturing to the bundle of fur resting peacefully. "She's not just an animal in need of saving. She symbolizes resilience, defiance against a world that often seeks to silence its struggles. Each of us has our own battles. Why should this be any different?" A murmur rippled through the crowd, and for the first time she detected a hint of contemplation on faces once hard with judgment. Sarah took a step forward, her emotions surging. "I stand before you not just as a hopeful caretaker, but as someone who believes in the possibility of change, in myself and in all of us." But just as the atmosphere began to warm, her vocal critic snapped back, voice razor sharp. "That's a nice story, Sarah, but feelings won't save the real world. You think just because you care, you can neglect the risks posed to us? A prickle of frustration ignited within Sarah, slicing through her newly discovered resolve. It's not negligence. It's acknowledging that we're part of this ecosystem, not separate from it. Fear and misunderstanding don't protect us. They harm us. For a moment, it felt as if she stood at the edge of a cliff, the ground giving way beneath her. Would she let the fear of backlash pull her back, or would she jump into the unknown, ready to reshape her fate? As she looked around, she saw faces beginning to soften, eyes wide with interest mixed with uncertainty. Some still donned the armor of skepticism, but others seemed to reconsider. There was something tangible in the air now, a flicker of potential. "Let's take a step back rather than retreat," she proposed, voice steadying with each word. "How can we learn together? Why not venture forward and explore what it means to coexist? I want to learn from you, as well as teach." A deep silence enveloped the room, the tension palpable, yet it felt different now. The winds of doubt were shifting, howling at her back. But this time, Sarah didn't waver. A hand rose from the back, a woman who had been silent until now. "What exactly do you propose? You want us to speak about saving a wolf cub, but how does that help our community?" That question hung in the air like a bell tolling, and suddenly, Sarah understood. She had to connect her vision to the wider implications, how her journey intersected with theirs. It was a daunting challenge, but, in that moment, another wave of resiliency wrapped around her. "I propose that we start a conversation, not just about wolves in need, but about how we can recalibrate our perspectives. Through engagement, education, and empathy, we can build a bridge between us and the wildlife around us." The room hummed with possibility, the crowd latching on to her words. Each heartbeat echoed a moving current, leaving Sarah heightened, closer than ever to her goal, her identity emerging before her. But could she keep this momentum? Was she ready for the next confrontation, yet to come, that would put everything she'd built to the test? The question lingered heavily in the air, inviting both hope and uncertainty as she awaited their response, realizing the battle was far from over. The tension in the air seemed to thicken as Sarah stood before the crowd, the weight of anticipation pressing against her chest. She watched as the faces around her shifted, some still clad in skepticism, while others slowly began to awaken. This was not just a momentary discussion, it was a pivotal crossroads, a chance for transformation, not just for Luna, but for every person in that room. "Let's take this deeper," she urged, scanning the audience for a spark of connection. "Consider this. By protecting Luna, we protect a part of ourselves, our community's integrity, to coexist with nature. We have the power to reframe how we see not only wolves, but all wildlife around us." The woman who had asked the pointed question shifted in her seat, her brow furrowing with contemplation. Sarah sensed a crack in the once unmovable wall of their previous resolve. "I want to conduct workshops," she continued, seizing the moment. "Workshops that involve not just talking, but doing. We could learn about rehabilitation methods, the importance of biodiversity, the integral roles these animals play in our ecosystem." She paused, letting her thoughts cascade around her like a gentle rain. "Imagine a community project where we find common ground, where families can experience firsthand the beauty and challenges of nature. If we invite people to experience rather than fear, we create allies, not adversaries." The murmurs resumed, this time tinged with curiosity rather than hostility. She observed their shifting expressions, a glimmer of newfound consideration. It was as if she had thrown a pebble into a still pond and observed the ripples spreading, reaching corners of their anxieties she had yet to touch. A younger man, seated near the front, raised his hand, challenging yet supportive. "What if things go wrong? What if we take the wrong approach and wind up in a worse situation?" His concern mirrored her own internal fears, a specter that nagged at her awareness. But rather than recoil, she met his gaze. This was the point where vulnerability transformed into strength. "That's a valid concern, and I feel it too," she replied, drawing on her own emotional courage. "We can't predict every outcome, but we can pivot. Every experience increases our understanding. Failure can teach us just as much as success. The key is adaptability, which mirrors the resilience of nature itself. We must be ready to learn and adjust. Silence settled once more, tension rippling through the crowd, but now edged with a tone of shared responsibility. The skeptical gaze of her critic softened slightly, revealing a crack of insight within the rigidity. This could be about much more, Sarah pressed on, emboldened by their subtle shifts. It's about confronting our fears, not just of wolves or wildlife, but of our own biases and misgivings. We can cultivate a respect for the world beyond our front doors, opening ourselves up to growth both personally and collectively. The younger man nodded slowly, and something electric moved through her, a rush of hope. But beneath that hope lurked an undercurrent of doubt. After all, some might still see her efforts as idealistic rather than pragmatic. Just then, as she stood poised on the brink of a breakthrough, the sharp critic spoke again, voice laced with condescension. "So, you're suggesting we all just hold hands and sing songs while the wolves take our children? What protection do we have here?" His words struck like thunder, an immediate challenge to everything she had built thus far. Anger swelled within her as she considered her response. She was on the verge of losing the ground gained, and she had to think quickly. Before she could respond, the crowd began to murmur again. This time, the tension contained within their murmurs transformed into a collective inquiry. The energy shifted once more, and Sarah knew the fight wasn't merely for Luna, but for her own emerging identity, a fight to claim her space, her determination, her story. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "What I propose is facing our fears, questioning our narratives, and protecting what truly matters. All of us," she declared, her voice climbing to crescendo. "Yes, there are risks, but without the willingness to embrace the unknown, we will remain prisoners of our fears." Challenging each face in the crowd, Sarah felt the stakes rising higher, fiery, yet fragile. It was then she realized that this discussion was more than just about wolves. It was a litmus test for her own strength, a declaration of her commitment to navigate the tumultuous waters ahead. Would they join her on this journey, or would they retreat into the safety of doubt? As the charged silence lingered, ripe with unresolved questions and inner reckonings, Sarah braced herself for what might come next. It was a moment that held limitless potential, yet she could sense an impending storm. Could she truly embed her vision as a credible path forward, or would the weight of expectation and fear stifle her voice in the end? Sarah's heart raced, caught between the thrill of uncertainty and the daunting responsibility looming in the air. She had ignited something in them. Now the question was, could she keep that flame alive? The answer lay just beyond the horizon where the winds would lead next, and she could feel it beckoning her to take another daring step forward. The palpable tension in the room hung like fog, transforming each heartbeat into a countdown. Sarah stood her ground, feeling the weight of every eye trained on her. There was an unspoken agreement emerging among them, a moment of shared unease. This was no longer a simple presentation, it felt like a reckoning. As the crowd continued to absorb her words, something unexpected fluttered within her chest. A flicker of self-doubt pierced through her resolve. What if she was alone in this? What if her vision was flawed, unachievable? She could almost sense the harsh scrutiny of her surroundings wrapping around her like chains. Yet instinctively, she understood that this fear could either anchor her or propel her forward. Sarah's gaze locked momentarily with the critic, and an image of her life thus far flashed in her mind. A series of missed chances and timid decisions. Hadn't she waited long enough in her career for affirmation? This moment was her stage. She swallowed her fear, transforming it into determination. "Fear creates barriers," she said, voice steadier, more assured. "It can make us blind to possibilities. If we dwell on risks, we miss the beauty of potential breakthroughs." The words flowed from her, ignited by the strength of her convictions. The faces softened. She saw seeds of consideration sprouting in their eyes. Every pause she made contoured the silence that fell, each breath a bridge. She considered how to wield authenticity as a tool, each moment dipped in genuine vulnerability. "What if we became the solution?" she proposed, full of resolve. "What if fear didn't paralyze but became something that ignited our curiosity?" She sensed her agency start to expand, wrapping around the others like a living thread. They were transfixed, and with each sentence she could feel the potential for change deepening in the collective consciousness. But then her troubled conscience slid in with bitter clarity. Why had she hesitated for so long? Why had she not spoken out earlier, taking the reins on her own narrative? Her own self-sabotage threatened to re-emerge, whispering doubts about her authority and ability to lead. The internal struggle unfolded in her mind, scrutinizing her worthiness to speak on the matters of nature, while grappling with her own uncertainties. The younger man from before, visibly shifting in his seat, raised his hand again, this time more cautiously. What about accountability? How do we ensure what we attempt won't lead to more suffering? It's a heavy responsibility. The weight of his question hung in the air like a palpable tension. Sarah felt herself shifting, stepping into a realm ripe for personal growth. Her heartbeat quickened, sensing the latent challenge within the inquiry. "Every initiative carries responsibility," she replied. "But it is also an opportunity for collaboration, to learn together in the face of uncertainty. It's not about having all the answers. It's about growing through our journeys." Seconds stretched into what felt like lifetimes, the room stilling as her words settled. The realization struck hard. She could not only evolve her perspective but inspire others to reconsider their approaches. This was her chance to instigate a shift not merely for them, but for herself. Feeling the stakes higher than ever, she met the eyes before her with unyielding courage. This path won't be easy, and acknowledging our fears is the first step. Let's open this discussion, not with assumptions but with curiosity. Together we can create an environment conducive to collaboration and healing. And as she locked eyes with the critic's glare, a spark of challenge ignited within her, a will to confront the very doubts that threatened to undermine her. She was prepared to establish a foundation of integrity and intention. Sarah sensed the room transforming, an undercurrent of energy shifting toward collective introspection. Could she dare to commit herself to this? As their reactions began to ripple through the audience, she knew the pivotal nature of her journey was on the verge of unfolding. But would her willingness to lead into the unknown be met with acceptance, or would past fears rise once more to shield them from embracing her vision? Each moment thickened with anticipation, leaving her teetering on the edge of either breakthrough or breakdown, the choice looming like shadows on the horizon. Sarah inhaled deeply, feeling the surge of her own resolve. The battle lines had been drawn, and now it was time to move forward or risk perpetuating the cycle of fear that had gripped them all. What awaited her in this uncharted territory had the potential to define her not just as a leader, but as a person ready to embrace change. Would she fully embody this next chapter, and at what cost? As Sarah stood there, the tension settling like dust in the air, she felt a profound shift within her. The opportunity to articulate her vision, once suffocated by her self-doubt, crackled with palpable energy. She could no longer afford to retreat into the shadows of uncertainty. This was her moment to redefine not only the expectations of her peers, but also her own perception of herself. The audience's restless energy seemed to pulse like a living thing, echoing her own internal conflict. With every rising question and hesitant glance, she sensed their fear mirrored within her. Yet, clinging to her newfound courage, Sarah realized that vulnerability offered a unique strength. It allowed for connection and authenticity in a space so often dominated by confidence and bravado. Accountability, she mused, turning back to the young man who had posed the query. You raise a critical point. Without accountability, we descend into chaos. But in embracing the weight of that responsibility, we become catalysts for growth. As she spoke, fragments of her past formed a tapestry of experience behind her. Her failures, her lessons, and the faces of those who had doubted her. This awareness propelled her thoughts forward, setting the tone for the dialogue she was determined to cultivate. What if she shared her struggles openly? What if she too disclosed her fears? How she shied away from leadership roles? How she stumbled over her own words in pursuit of clarity? There was a power in transparency that transcended simple communication. As the realization dawned on her, she began to weave her personal journey into the fabric of her message. I won't pretend that I have all the answers, she said, her tone firm yet inviting. In fact, I've grappled with indecision and self-doubt for far too long. This process is not just about making informed choices, it's about sharing those choices and their consequences together. A murmur of acknowledgement rippled through the crowd, and with each nod, Sarah felt the atmosphere shift even more. The audience was engaging, no longer wearing the armor of skepticism. Instead, they were beginning to unearth their own narratives, each one tethered to the broader inquiry she had initiated. The skeptic's glare softened, replaced with curiosity. Yet, as she opened the floodgates of dialogue, a lingering anxiety pricked at Sarah. Was she truly ready for the responsibility that came with opening herself so fully? She instinctively wrapped her arms around her waist as if physically shielding herself from the vulnerability laid bare before them. "Let's challenge ourselves," she proposed, her tone firm as she harnessed every ounce of her resolve. "What if, just for today, we acknowledge our fears and use them as the bedrock for our exploration? Let's identify our commitments and acknowledge our apprehensions openly. Imagine the breakthroughs we could find together." The room swelled with a collective intake of breath, the kind that precedes transformation. Sarah noticed glimmers of possibility illuminating faces. She saw it in the eyes of that young man, the hesitant one, who was slowly finding his footing. "Every journey begins with the admission of its difficulty," Sarah continued, sensing the awakening bonds among them. This was no longer solely her mission. It was evolving into a shared narrative. But still, one question nagged at her. Would this transparent approach ultimately foster deeper trust? Or would it frighten them away? What if they reacted not with open minds, but with a defensive retreat into silence? Sarah's heart raced as potential outcomes unfurled in her mind, each more outlandish than the last. She thought of the barriers built from fear and doubt, poised to collapse or morph into gateways of opportunity. Would her newfound sense of leadership prevail, or would she be trapped in her own web of vulnerability? Just as she prepared to deepen the conversation, a voice from the back called out, "But what if we fail spectacularly?" The room held its breath, waiting for her answer. Here, in this volatile mix of trepidation and potential, one question could either solidify her leadership or unravel her vision. Would she embrace the fear, or would she falter under its weight? And in that critical moment she realized the answer she offered would either define her path forward or leave her grappling with the very shadows she sought to transcend. The air grew heavier as the question hung in the room, echoing in Sarah's mind. What if they failed spectacularly? This wasn't just another passing thought. It was a chasm that seemed to widen between her aspirations and the reality of what they were attempting. The audience's uncertainty mirrored her own, a taut string vibrating with the potential of failure. But in that moment, staring at the audience, she felt the weight shift. Sarah inhaled slowly, grounding herself, and responded, "Failure is not the end. It's a lesson wrapped in experience. Each setback we face can be our guiding light rather than a dark trap." She could feel their eyes on her, not just with skepticism but with a flicker of hope. Perhaps they were searching for something real, something to believe in amidst their own fears. Anxiety shifted inside her, transforming into determination. Let's explore this idea together. What does failure teach us? How can we leverage it to arise stronger? Collecting her thoughts, she recalled moments that had threatened to drown her, lost opportunities, missed deadlines, unyielding expectations. Those experiences had shaped her, but they didn't define her. She could share these without the haze of shame or guilt, showing that failure was merely part of the journey. In doing so, she disarmed the audience's trepidations, showcasing a perspective they could all relate to. The young man from earlier shifted in his seat, intrigued. "So, you think we can turn failures into stepping stones?" "Yes," Sarah affirmed, feeling the current of the conversation pull her deeper into this intertwining narrative. By owning our failures, we acknowledge our very humanity. We grow not in spite of our missteps, but because of them. As she paced the stage, she could see several audience members nodding thoughtfully. The atmosphere was transforming from one of anxiety to that of collective contemplation. Sarah felt a thrill rush through her as she delved deeper, tapping into a reservoir of memories. Her mistakes crystallized into valuable lessons, the painful moments forged into wisdom. This was not just about her. It was about everyone gathered. "Each failure I've faced taught me resilience," she continued, her voice gaining power and conviction. Resilience, when we practice it openly, allows us to take bigger risks. It propels us beyond our thresholds and eventually into success. But beneath her growing confidence lay an undercurrent of fear. What if their connection came undone? What if the lessons she offered were not enough to bridge the vast divide of doubt still lurking in the room? Feeling the stakes rise, she paused, allowing silence to envelop them, letting her words sink in. The truth is, growth doesn't happen in a vacuum. It requires trust, dialogue, and, yes, vulnerability. There it was again. Vulnerability. An unsettling but potent theme woven throughout their conversation. Sarah realized she was not just leading this discussion, but paving her path forward, a journey that she now wished to embrace fully. What happens next involves all of us, she added, scanning the room. Are we willing to explore these ideas together? To risk stepping into the unknown, despite the very real possibility of failure? She sensed the energy shift again, a current of potential weaving through the air. Yet, the fear of rejection still loomed, a specter in the back of her mind. Would they choose to engage with her vision? Or would they retreat, sealed off from the very change they might be craving? As she awaited their response, Sarah felt a spark of courage igniting within her, mingling with uncertainty. Perhaps, she considered, embracing this fear was the true mark of leadership. The idea began to take root in her mind like a fragile seed, hungry for sunlight. In that moment, she knew her journey had become intertwined with theirs. This shared vulnerability could become the catalyst for real change. But would they take the risk with her? Just then, a woman with fiery determination in her eyes stood up. I say yes, but we'll need more than just words. We need to take action. As the challenge rippled through the room, Sarah felt the breath catch in her throat. Action? Were they truly ready to embrace that next step? The room seemed to pulse with anticipation as Sarah processed the woman's call for action. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from the realization that words were no longer sufficient. Ideas had sparked a fire, and now they needed fuel to make it grow. Taking a moment to steady herself, Sarah stepped forward. You're absolutely right, she confirmed, her voice robust with certainty. Talk is merely the beginning. We have to manifest our discussions into tangible actions. The audience was shifting restlessly in their seats, a blend of eagerness and apprehension in their expressions. Each face became both familiar and foreign in that moment. They were no longer just spectators. They were potential partners in an unfolding journey. Sarah had to ignite their commitment, to bind them together in pursuit of transformation. What actions can we take? She posed, pacing deliberately as she sought answers. Let's start here, right now. What does action look like for us? Silence enveloped the room once more, but it was pregnant with possibility. A sense of urgency simmered beneath the surface. Sarah's mind raced. Should she lead by example or invite collaboration among them? Rethinking her strategy, she sat on the edge of the stage, momentarily lowering her guard. I'll share one actionable step I've taken in the past, she began, feeling vulnerable yet emboldened. I opened up about my failures to a trusted friend. It was terrifying. I thought I'd be judged, but instead, I found understanding and support. That conversation redirected my perspective on failure. As her story unfolded, she watched as tension in the audience began to morph into engagement. Some nodded in understanding. Others leaned in, eager for more. The intimacy of her confession created a ripple of connection. Now I want to know, she continued, leaning into the energy. Who among you has been inspired to take a first step? It doesn't need to be grand. It can be as simple as sharing a fear or an aspiration you've held back on. A man in the back raised his hand hesitantly. I've always wanted to start my own business, but I've been scared of what might happen. What if I fail? That's it, exactly, Sarah exclaimed, her heart invigorated by the interaction. Fear of failure can be paralyzing, but acknowledging it is the first step towards action. What would it look like if you took one small step towards that dream today? Another hand shot up, this time belonging to an older woman. I want to write a book, but have always convinced myself that I'm not a good enough writer. Imagine if you allowed yourself the freedom to write without expectation. Just write for the sake of writing, Sarah urged, her enthusiasm building. This dynamic exchange breathed life into their aspirations, creating an atmosphere of solidarity as they shared insecurities laid bare. As they began to discuss their dreams and barriers, Sarah couldn't help but feel the gravity of her evolving role. Each story told, every uncertainty shared, built a mosaic of human experience, one where vulnerability transformed into inspiration. This was leadership unfolding in real time, and she was at the forefront of it. But with this newfound purpose also came a daunting realization. What if the actions they discussed were only words, if not followed by commitment? Doubts clawed at her peace, ready to undermine her resolve. Would the momentum last beyond this moment? Could they each deliver on the promises whispered in the shadows of this gathering? As the dialogue surged, she also felt her own fear clawing at the edges of her consciousness. The moment of truth loomed, both exhilarating and terrifying. Then a voice from the crowd cut through her thoughts. But what if we fail at taking action? It was laced with uncertainty, steady yet resolute. Sarah paused, the weight of the question lingering. How to guide them through that fear loomed large on her mind, and the answer would require diving deeper into both her understanding and her own limitations. The stakes were higher now. Their collective journey had truly begun. "Are we ready to find out?" she asked, her heart racing. In the days that followed the gathering, Sarah felt an enlightening sense of clarity and urgency envelop her. The dialogue sparked a newfound fire within her spirit, compelling her to push forward not only on behalf of Luna, but for the community and herself. Their initial hesitance now transformed into commitment, driving her to shape a series of actionable steps toward sustainable coexistence with wildlife. She meticulously mapped out her ideas, workshops that combined education and engagement, where townsfolk could immerse themselves in the realities of wildlife rehabilitation. Sarah envisioned nature hikes tailored for families, teaching them to respect animal habitats while fostering a love for the environment. Her passion fueled her, and each step brought her closer to her mother's heartache and her father's legacy. She understood now that honoring her father did not mean circling back to simply maintaining a clinic. It meant evolving with it. Weeks passed, and as the first workshop approached, a buzz of excitement threaded through Jackson. Her commitment had snowballed, converting skeptics into partners. She witnessed an astounding transformation. Not only were they learning about wildlife, but they were also reshaping perceptions and breaking down barriers of misunderstanding. The initial critics of her endeavors transformed into advocates. The same town that once doubted her journey began to appreciate the complexities of coexistence. As she stood before the group during the first workshop, the crisp summer air invigorated her. Each participant embodied a blend of skepticism and curiosity. With Luna by her side, now more than a mere rescue animal, but a beloved emblem of hope, Sarah felt a profound sense of belonging unfold. She recalled the nerves that once plagued her. It was replaced now with unshakable confidence. "Thank you for joining us today," Sarah began, her voice steady and clear. She glanced around the assembly, locking eyes with familiar faces that once wore skepticism. "Today is a celebration of learning, growth, and understanding, not just for you, but for all of us, including Luna." The energy in the room shifted palpably. She could feel the openness radiating from her audience. As they toured the wildlife rehabilitation station set up in the clinic's backyard, her heart swelled with pride and purpose. She was no longer just her father's daughter. Now she was a leader forging her path. Tangible successes unfolded throughout the day. Participants empathized with animals in dire need and shared their worries and dreams. A collective dialogue arose, driven by a sense of synergy rather than discord. The initial divide felt fragile. They now coexisted in a space where understanding and compassion reigned supreme. This was her accomplishment, a multifaceted achievement arising from commitment, passion, and the resilience that Luna embodied. After a lively discussion, chatter buzzed as participants reflected on their experiences, and some even began forming local initiatives aimed at wildlife preservation. That evening, Sarah received a message from a local environmental group, eager to collaborate on outreach programs promoting coexistence in the wild. She felt the culmination of her efforts cascade into reality. Her worries were no longer shackled by fear. Sarah's business had begun to flourish and, as unexpected as it was, her father's legacy lingered on, now intertwined with her vision for the clinic. Recognition for her innovations trickled in as she received local media coverage, showcasing her work inspiring change in the town. But more importantly, the journey had profoundly altered her. No longer adrift in her father's shadow, she stood firmly on her feet, poised to embrace not just every challenge but the boundless opportunities each conversation unfurled. The clinic brimming with life not only sustained her father's memory, but heralded a bright future that was wholly her own. With each workshop, each animal healed and each mind changed, she felt the release of the pressure that had once loomed. In realizing her role as a changemaker, her confidence swelled, a recognition that culminated in her becoming an established presence in the community. No longer defined by grief, Sarah proved to herself and others the power of transformation through acceptance, understanding, and action. As she watched the sun setting over the distant mountains, Sarah clutched Luna, feeling the warmth of triumph wrap around her like a soft quilt. She had not merely survived, she had gained mastery over her narrative. This was her moment, a moment when she stepped forward and took her place as a champion of wildlife and a steadfast advocate of individual empowerment. She emerged from the journey not just as a veterinary caretaker, but as a leader, teacher, and a source of inspiration for those who sought to overcome their fears. This transformation was permanent. She conquered her internal struggles and emerged, finally achieving the sense of belonging she had long yearned for. You need to subscribe now to ensure you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. This is your moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Seriously, it makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about this conclusion. Your voice matters. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this journey. Don't wait even one more second to share.